Show. This is episode 3 of my climb back from the abyss. As you can see from the rating graph, it's been a hard couple years. Really, like, I guess the kids catching up to me and just old age. And now is my attempt to come back. And this show is a lot of it is about me holding myself accountable to a wider unknown audience out there. And it has become pretty interesting just because I have to, during the week, subconsciously, I'm thinking about what I'm doing with my own chess improvement. And I think it's at least helping me hold the line, if you will, in my training. Um, so, an amazing chess miracle happened that I have to report from last week. On the show, Vishnu was talking to me and saying, why aren't you? I was showing my list of tournaments, and he was like, well, why aren't you playing Baltimore Open? And I said, well, the old lady's not going to let me. I got to help take care of the kids on the weekend and stuff. But then this chess miracle happened where the grandparents came into town and they were like, yeah, you want to go play a tournament? Go play a tournament. So I got to go play this tournament just on the spur of the moment, Baltimore Open. Pretty well organized, not a huge event or anything, but very well organized. Played I believe the first guy was an FM, then 4 IMs, two of them very strong IMs, and scored 4 out of 1. So, not the greatest result, but definitely a small boost of confidence and like just a little bit of encouragement I needed to feel like I was making some kind of progress. So, this is my cartoonish graph about the FIDE hasn't updated yet, but that's my guess around somewhere around there, around 2450. So hopefully this show won't last too long in terms of years or whatever, and I'll get to 2500. And I just want to express maybe the goal. It's like a lot of people have a goal of master and whatever, and this is kind of weird because I already was a GM. You got to reach 2500 and yada yada. But like long term, if I feel like if I want to play in cool events like the U.S. Senior and the senior team, all that kind of stuff, I'm definitely going to have to be above 2,500. I never got to play in any Olympiads, not even close. I played the Mind Games 2008 in China. That was really cool, but I was never the guy to get to travel and do fun and cool stuff. So, long term, that's kind of the aim here with me forcing myself back up. In addition to just wanting to feel good about myself, I feel like too, if you teach some chess, it doesn't feel good if you're not working on it yourself. At least I'll speak for my own self there, as it feels a little bit hypocritical and also like you're not engaged with the material, let's call it. Okay, let me give a brief update on just some basic things. In terms of improvement, one thing I added here, this at the very bottom, is that I've gone off blitz. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it's kind of interesting to me. You know, I feel like over the years I played blitz the way I think some other people play video games, like Resident Evil or whatever it is. In that it's a diversion. It helps me relax, but I think it really hurts me in terms of my conscientiousness of a good move, right? Like, especially you play a real event with a longer time control. The problem is that if you're not really going deep on your decisions, then you're going to play superficial moves. And an insight into this whole thing that I got recently was this discovery about modafinil. And they did this, which is marketed as Provigil. It's a drug, and I finally got into it and got to understand what's going on. And it's this thing where whatever you're doing, it's going to make you feel better about yourself while you're doing it. So they did it with chess players. They did a big experiment, and the results were that you performed 15% better on modafinil. And the there and even with that 15%, there was a downside. And that downside was that people were losing on time. It was really interesting because like they were so into what they were thinking that they lost on time. But even with that downside, they were still 15% gain. Red on blue, hard to look at. All right, I'll fix it. I didn't know. I'm still a beginner with this whole thing. So I'll fix the red on blue. Um, so, anyways, about this modafinil, uh, the thing that I got out of it is that I oftentimes, when you're in a difficult position and you've already thought about it for a while, a lot of times you're just like, screw it, and you just make a move. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I know playing Blitz does that to me. It makes it easier for me to just be like, oh, okay, let's just play the intuitive move, and that's just not what good chess is in my experience. Did some problems, and now that I played this tournament, now I have 10 games left to review. I'm down on the clock in terms of my game review, which is the most important thing I do. And if you look at my tournaments, I got one coming up weekend after next. So I'm not going to be able to get all 10 done, but that's on the agenda. And my fitness, I always do an update. No, not doing too good. I feel I got some weird, like, hip problem, and it's just been a real bummer. So my fitness, absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. Um, Today, what I thought I would do is show a game uh, that where I felt like me talking about a particular position, teaching it, if you will, helped me understand it much better myself. So sometimes last year, Vishnu was talking to me about doing something with the Carlsbad because I had recommended it to him. Um, so actually, I posted on Twitter. Kai Greg said he took modafinil for a while, and by the way, I talked to a neurologist friend of mine. He's like, yeah, the problem is might be a negative feedback loop. So like it might end up hurting your overall happiness or some weird thing like that. So I don't know if I would try it once for sure. I don't, and I don't understand too. Like, it feels kind of illegal to do it too. No one's getting drug tested or anything, but so I don't, I feel like there's a whole swirl of questions around this modafinil and performance enhancing drugs, and I'm sure that the top players are doing it. I'm positive. Um, I think Scott posted the rating was 15% higher. Yeah, that's my understanding. And right, I have another friend. I talked to him. Kai Grex is talking about hypersonia. Actually, I don't know what hypersonia. Maybe what he was saying was that he was having insomnia, like real trouble sleeping. Hypersomnia. I guess that's what it is. Some kind of trouble sleeping. But in any case, and it got expensive. Yeah, I have no idea how expensive it is either. That's at least a barrier to it. All right. Yeah, I'm sure they're doing some drug testing. I talked to this friend of mine who is a psychiatrist, and he said there might be difficult to test for. Some drugs you can't really test for. Anyways, I'm a total novice with that. Main point is you want to create an ethic of conscientiousness in your chess decisions, and maybe I'll show a couple things here. So, Vishnu, this one's for you a little bit here, buddy. Let me show you what happened. So like I said, I did this Carlsbad thing. Let me just show the beginning here. And if you're going to, this to me is not only the best way against the Queen's Gambit decline, but it's also just a simple system that I don't think you need too much, it's not that hard to understand. And as I told Vishnu in that, I did a video. If you want to look, it's online. I think I called it like the Carlsbad for Vishnu or something like that. And the main point is you're playing for domination, first of all, with this knight here. And it's a very volatile situation. Basically, black has to find a way to relieve the pressure. And one thing I said in that video is you shouldn't be obsessed with getting e4 in right away. In fact, the bummer for black is that you're holding the e4 threat over his head. Now, once e4 comes, if he doesn't respond to it, you're going to play e5 and f4. And of course, if he does respond to it and takes, you're going to open up the f file. So it's a very dangerous situation, and black has to be every move, wonder about whether or not I'm going to get e4 in. Interesting. $10 a pill. My psychiatrist friend, worked in the industry for a long time, and he took it because they were just sending him free samples. That's the way it worked for those guys. So there's a variety of different moves here, and one thing about the system I like a lot is uh, I can't memorize openings at this point in my life. It's really a bad situation. So the best I can do is kind of understand a structure. So G6 happens now, and like I said, there's a variety of different things that he could do. And the next move I was able to play without thinking too long. And it's the kind of move that, unless you had seen some similar ideas, you wouldn't know about. And that's just to back it up with bishop h4. And the idea is, I really don't want to trade this guy off. He kind of really wants to park himself back here, if anything, to prevent trades and thereby, really use your extra center pawn as your space advantage. Is g6 normal there? Well, we'll see. He wants to go to e6 and g7. I definitely know it's a move, but like I said, Vishnu, I can't memorize all these different variations. No idea. No idea. I haven't looked at this game with the computer yet. I definitely will when I go over it. This is just my initial response, to this game. So the guy plays knight e6, and the thing about this move is he is thinking about maybe playing c5. So one of the cool things about this position for white is, you kind of have a vocabulary of different plans. We can play king here, for example. I could play the bishop back. I could play a rook to e1. Some people even think about things like b4. Honestly, I don't believe white should be playing for the minority attack, but it should be at least maybe on your radar. So since c5 I want to take out, I play rook ad1. I thought that was a good move, because the rook will be useful not only in stopping c5, but in any kind of e4 break that I make. So the guy plays king h1, excuse me, a6, and it's kind of weird. Like, the problem now with c5 was, I just figured I'm going to win the d pawn at this point if you play c5 immediately. So a6 is a weird move because, okay, you're stopping bishop b5, but it is a full tempo that you just gave me. Plus, I'm not sure about whether you've maybe weakened yourself on the queen side a little bit. Well, I said king h1. And another thing I knew just from kind of looking at similar positions was that the problem for black is that if he opens the position now, white's pieces are just much better. They're more active, and he's just worse developed. And he's got this queen sitting on this file. So, for example, I think c5, my intention was to say here, knight f4, and that it's going to be very difficult to defend this guy. I think, for example, obviously bishop e6, there might be more than one problem. But I think I have moves just like bishop c4. And I think the pawn is gone. So I would have checked that, but that was my thought, that he couldn't actually play c5 anyway after the rook is on d1. So king h1 has to be a good building move. And a thing too that's interesting about it is that I saw already that my bishop might want to go to g1. So it's not just getting the king out of this diagonal, but it's also freeing up that square for my bishop. By the way, let me just say a couple words about my opponent. This is definitely a case where I'm playing what I thought was a superior opponent, definitely someone who has way more natural talent than me. This guy, Mykola Bortnik from the Ukraine, huge rapid and blitz player, kind of like Andrew Yang. He's up there, and he's got a huge puzzle rush score and all this other stuff. So if you wanted to measure chess talent in terms of blitz and puzzle rush, then for sure this guy's just much better than me. And I don't have a problem with saying that he's better than me. I know that might sound like I'm making a joke by saying puzzle rush and blitz, but those are definitely measures of how good of a player you are. At least your, let's say, natural skill. Now notice Vishnu, he's an animal. He's talking about plans with G4, H4, H5. Vishnu, no, we're just trying to control him, man. We don't want to lose our minds yet. If we play G4, the idea would be to take away the square of F5, which honestly he's not really getting to anytime soon. Okay, he does play knight G7, and we continue the dance with bishop F2. And here, already it's difficult for black, I feel, because I don't see how he's ever going to stop e4. I can do it whenever I want. And there's no easy way for him to fix his position, you know? Especially, and when I say that, I guess one thing I should stress is it's really not clear where this guy, for example, is going to go. So even though the next couple moves by black will seem maybe superficial, it's hard to know what the guy should do at this point. Okay. Tang the Penguin I Am guy. Yeah, that's not this guy, by the way, but I'm just comparing him to Tang because Tang is also about a 2500 level GM over the board. But then when you look at his rapid and stuff, he's, especially 1 minute, he's like one of the best in the world. Okay, so did I say Andrew Yang? That would be really funny. Okay, Andrew Tang. He must get that all the time. I hadn't even thought about that. So, do I have to break with e4? I don't, and maybe I'm pulling the gun a little bit early, but it did feel correct to me, and I didn't really know how to improve my position more at this point. Like maybe I could be hyper about it and play bishop g1. I'm sure I'm sure g4, Vishnu's move, is also fine. But I just wanted to see what he wanted to do here. I saw that coming, and I said, no, that's it. Just I didn't think it would work. But he plays bishop g5, and now I haven't spent that much time in this position, but here I do start to tank. I spend 14 minutes on this move, and I've been doing a lot of endgame puzzles studies, and I feel like this is the situation, honestly, where I'm weaker than most GMs. Like this is okay, so like let me put it this way. The positional phase of the game is now over. I've won that. I'm definitely better, but now we're headed to the tactical phase, and it's a real mess. Clearly, he's trying to be an opportunist on my king side and create grief. And I have to find a way to continue to control the pieces. One thing in terms of how I understand chess is that Smyslov has this great quote where he says, that all positional advantages positional strategies culminate in a tactical finish. And this is an example of it where it's going to get all of a sudden really messy. So I feel like, and this is something I'm going to analyze deeper with my, just by myself in my notebook and all that. But I feel like White's two choices here were bishop c4, which is what I played, and rook f3. Just to play rook f3 and rook f1 and claim that I'm significantly better. So rook f3, rook f1, you don't need to calculate it that much, but the problem is like, well, it's kind of hard to see exactly what's next, because the guy will put his bishop on e6, and so it's not like I'm going to crack the f7 point in any meaningful way. Plus, do I really want to bring this other rook over to f1? It seemed like to me that he was already useful where he was. So I decided to pull the trigger here. Yeah, e5 and knight e4. He is going to do this stuff with bishop e3 to me, though. So I want to, and once bishop e3 comes, he wants queen h4. So I do have to be proactive. Okay, so I played bishop c4, bishop e6. I'm going to call that forced. Now, the drawback here with the positional drawback with what I did is I'm helping him trade off stuff. And because he's cramped, uh, ideally, it's not the positional ideal thing. I'm obviously going for gold now when I do this. So I go takes, rook takes, and now queen b3. So we're looking at f7, we're looking at b7, and obviously we're trying to claim that these pieces are ineffective on the side of the board. Now, one funny thing here is basically, it's not like necessarily like I missed his next move, but I did not think it was possible. He played bishop e3, and it's kind of a puzzle rushy move, honestly. Like there's all of a sudden a lot of tricks going on. The good news for me though is that at least I believed in my position here because I'm better developed, my center control is great. The knight on h5, unless it mates me in some fantastic way, isn't a great piece. Now, one of the things though is I have to go for violence, and if I ever play d5, then I'm going to lose this square, and for example, then the knight becomes a genius with knight e5. Good question. I did look at d5 here, and what I couldn't figure out, this is a really good point, is if I just take it, and he goes bishop d7, what am I going to do about knight e5 coming? And if I feel like if he gets that piece onto e5, it's really going to be a strong defensive piece. So for example, d6, and now I'd have to worry about both bishop e6 and knight e5. And I didn't see a way through there, but I definitely spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I took the thing, bishop e3, and I thought forever here, man. Yeah, I think this was good. I thought for 23 minutes in this position. And this was why I led with the no blitz. And I did play d5 now. I think it's a good move. We're going to look a little bit more about it. Now, before I go on with this game, I want to just share, when I did the lecture for Vishnu on the Carlsbad, I believe one of the games I covered was this Kasparov game, and I just want to go through it briefly because in the back of my mind, I had this same position. Now I had the similar idea. This is the same position. Bishop e6 was this is Kasparov against Ulf Andersson, 1988. A e1, and now takes. Knight f4, queen f2, really nice play, e4. So takes, and obviously Kasparov had an idea after rook cd7, and he plays d5. So the thing about this is, in general, I think we can say we don't want to play d5 unless it is winning. We just don't want to do it. And in this case, it looks pretty good for Kasparov. I'll just run through the moves here. Takes, bishop b5 is the trick. There's no rook d6 because of e5. So rook c7 takes, back, bishop e2, very nice. No trades, and now I'm threatening d6. Now, I want to say when I first analyzed this game, I was a little bit disappointed because I was like, Gary, you had this beautiful center and now it's gone, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But in fact, when you look closer at it, the a-pawn will fall, and when that a-pawn falls, it's going to create all kinds of drama, not just the loss of the pawn, but then weakened queenside squares. Snip. Thank you very much. And this is already, I guess, toast. The two outside passed pawns. Actually, it's funny because we're going to get a very similar thing in my game. So anyways, what I wanted to say was just I had that somehow in the back of my mind that when you play d5, you want to have it really worked out, obviously, because you are giving loads of squares to black, especially things like e5, once you do play d5. All right, so go back. The guy, let's see here, bishop e3, and I did play d5 here. Let me just show some interesting variations. Like one reason is I assumed I was threatening the pawn. It turns out I really wasn't. So like rook e7 takes, I assumed this was his intention. King g1, knight e3, and I might have compensation for the exchange, but I saw this in my mind's eye, and for a second I thought, oh, now I have knight d5, really tricky. But then notice that no, it doesn't work because my knight is hanging at the end. So that was definitely a puzzle rush trick lying at the end of that for me. Okay, so here we go. d5. By the way, I'm not even sure this is, we're going to see. I'll check it by myself and then with the computer later. But it feels like it should work. So this all felt forced to me. Now, he took, and I took. Obviously, I'm threatening the bishop. Bishop takes, knight f6. Now, okay, so I'm winning the queen for a piece, a rook, and a pawn. And this was a very hard decision for me to make. I saw it coming, but I wasn't totally convinced that I was winning. And in this position, I felt like I should be winning, that there should be some win. So when I saw this in my mind's eye, I was hesitant to go in for it. In the game, I feel like black folded too easily. Let me just show a couple moves with what happened, and then I'll come back to this position. He took snip, snip, king g1, knight e4, and now I'm easily, I feel, winning because the queen's playing pinball over there, and there's no counterplay. Yeah, I can show you guys the rest of the game later, but that was, well, okay, I'll run through this. Knight f5 here, hitting the rook. Rook b8, now my knight gets active. Rook e4, there's no taking, I don't think, on b2. Oh, excuse me, it was, he played rook e5 or something. Oh dear, now I got it all mixed up. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like rook b8, knight d5, rook e1, h3. There's no knight g3 stuff. Snip, snip. Now I get to, everything is traded off. Totally winning. He tried to do h5, h4 to me and yada yada. But obviously, it's like the Kasparov game, but better. I'm going to have those pawns are just going to totally roll. But let me just share, in the game, I was uncertain about, in this position, knight f6. Just on principle, first of all, I thought it was really important that he trade off trade off both of my rooks so that my rook can't complement the queen and the knight in forming a counterattack, as happened in the game with the pawn on f7. So I thought it was going to go like this. Or this is what intuitively I thought would have been his best variation here. Rook takes, knight takes, king takes, knight takes. And I cannot play queen b7 yet because of this. And yeah, this is, I definitely think this is at least clear advantage. But there were parts of me saying to myself, I'm not sure. I just wasn't totally certain that this was winning for me. So, yeah, this is what I feel like this is what he should have done. Anyway, so that was, I felt like a reasonable game that I finally was able to play. It's been a while. And like I stated on the show before, the biggest problem I've had in recent tournaments was just in the early rounds, I got to play these 2200s. And I wasn't knocking them down. And then I never even got to play anybody like this guy. And that was both discouraging and just terrifying because these 2200 kids can be really dangerous. And then, that's how your rating is going to crash. Playing those kids all the time. Where you have to, like I said on before, if they're 400 points below you, you got to beat them 9 out of 10 times just to hold your rating. So, not so easy. Vishnu writes, you played a4 in the endgame, and I was watching and wondered why you didn't play rook d3 to go to c3 and then c7. In my first game, yeah, my first game, I felt like I was winning without much trouble, and I honestly, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Um, Let me show another endgame position that I thought was really interesting. So, let me flip the board here. Uh, One opponent I've faced a lot is this guy, Inkbot Tengshur, and he's actually an older guy like me. Used to be around 2400 and now is around 2300. Like me, I think, life is dealing him all, it's just hard to, you know, study and yada yada. But a guy with, I think, pretty good positional understanding, and especially as white, what I notice is that he really always tries to hold the position together. He never, very seldom takes risks and wants to just hold the position. And so, in that way, especially when I'm black, it's really hard to beat the guy. So, I thought I'd show you. So, before I go into it, what I've been doing a lot of is these endgame studies and endgames. And one thing I want to say about them is that, in contrast to like the Dvoretsky manual, where you are learning algorithms, the endgames that I get that are more the practical advantages of them, I rarely get the algorithm stuff. I feel like I can do the algorithm stuff fairly reasonably, but I rarely get it. And it's more like just being able to play and analyze these really difficult situations. So we had bishop f4, king g7, e3, rook over, and now I'm threatening rook h2. So now he has to give me his good bishop. And I felt like I was, let's call it, better here. Maybe not amazingly better, but better. Queen g4, b6. So now I'm threatening bishop takes b2. He plays b3. Maybe he should have considered rook b1. Snip, snip, a6. Rook c4, b5. ab, rook c2, rook a8. Let's play two more moves and then we'll talk about what's going on. Rook b1, rook h8, bishop f1, rook h b8. So, where do I get the practical endgame studies from? I have this book that I'm not going to recommend because it's just too hard to find, and it costs like a gazillion dollars. You know, it's this Russian book that I got when I was in Moscow. Like the only time I was in Moscow, like 2005 or something like that. So I don't recommend even trying to find the thing online. I don't read Russian or anything. By the way, there's a guy in Siberia who is like a software developer for Chessable, and he noted that I was trying to read some stuff off of it last time or something, and I pronounced the word for rook wrong because I was looking at the the consonant wrong. It was so it's I was think I was saying Padia for rook, and it's in fact Ladia because the P and the L look kind of similar. Anyways, so there are many different books though that you can get with endgames in them. This one I like mostly because it combines studies with actual game positions. Right, Ladia, that's right. And also, I want to say though, it is very difficult. So I do have students that I make them do sections of it, and oftentimes they're just like, "Dude, this is too hard. I can't do it." So in some ways, you might want to do other endgame books first. Any case, here we go. There's we get in a real. Okay, let me say a little bit about this position. I think my opponent felt that he was going to hold this, and it probably is holdable. But the bishops of opposite color are going to make it really violent, because if I can get an initiative on the dark squares, then he's down a piece on the dark squares. And it's going to be really hard for him to get an initiative because this pawn is really blocking his own bishop. In fact, if white could somehow amazingly throw that pawn away, then I think he would be completely fine. Imagine him throwing that pawn away and putting the bishop on d5. Then I'm going to have absolutely no chance of winning. So we're getting in a little time pressure. And by the way, one of the things I want to say about endgames that I find really interesting is, you're in third hour of play, you're a little tired. It's going to feel like you've been punched in the mouth already. Your juices are kind of running, and mistakes are going to be made in a totally different way than they are in the early phase of the game. So King f8. Now, I think a more practical move might have just been to put the rook on a3 first. But in a way, this is psychological because it's basically telling white that if you do nothing, my king is somehow going to find a way over here, and then the game really will be over. So we're going to see, though, there's some fateful problems with the king going to f8. So my opponent plays f4. Now here's the most important thing to see about f4 that's not immediately obvious, and that is that it weakens e3. I played bishop f6, king f3, rook a3, rook h2. So note where I'm moved 36 here. And yeah, it's getting spicy. He's got maybe 5 minutes left, and I've got maybe about 5 minutes left too. So this next move that I pull out of my hat, I couldn't totally calculate to the end, and I definitely missed at least one thing. And I did see, though, exactly the variation that happened in the game. Now, one thing, just as a word of practical advice for these situations, is pawns don't mean anything. Well, they mean something, but they mean far less than they usually do in these positions. Because if I can, like I said, if I can get an initiative, then that's what we want. Now, clearly what white has done, right, is said, well, you can't ever move this rook, so it's poor. So, I'll just keep looking at it. Now, I went for it with c4, takes, and now I actually have a big decision. Probably practically better is b4, almost for certain. But that was only something you'd understand with analysis. Why I didn't do b4, though, was that after rook d2, now I can't play bishop d4, which is the move I played in the game. And if I play b3, then there's something like rook d3. However, one thing that's clear here is I don't think I need to be a genius here. And if I just play king e7, I've got a great position. And it's really kind of hard for him to do anything about it. So, yeah, let's call that an advantage to black. Again, I'll look at this position more when I do the full analysis. Anyways, bishop d4. One reason I want to show you this is that really, like, there's some endgame study-like stuff that's going to happen here. So takes, rook takes, king g2. I played rook a8. He went for it with b6, and obviously I needed to see this move in advance. Rook a3. So now we've actually reached time control, and the guy has some time to think here. But here, yeah, here things go a little bit wrong for him. Now, clearly, if he plays b7, this is going to be mate. So first he plays king h1, snip. And here was the move that I saw for him that is, if I'd had more time, maybe at the beginning, I would have seen. Now, I'll just put his move on the board, and we'll come back to it. Well, let me show you the problem, actually, with bishop c4. If you want, you can think about what black should do here for a second. I'll babble for a minute. But he missed this tactic, and this is the tactic I saw when I played 37 bishop d4. And that is bishop takes b6. Thank you very much. I just take the thing, and rook takes is met by rook a1. So after which we'll talk about that too. But the key trick that I realized he could play is rook h8 exclam. And we get this weird like position you'd think that looks like it came from a study where bishop takes. Now notice, so there's no more mate over here, right? Because he's got this square. So I got to take b7. Now I figure this is forced. One of these rooks over here. Queen. I got to take the thing. He takes, and then my king has to go to this terrible square. And now, if anything, maybe white's, well, it's a draw now, but if anything, white has no problems at all because the pieces have become absolutely miserable, right? Maybe he should play, I don't know, maybe king g2 first. In any case, I can't, I'm never going to win this position because my king is so terrible. Yeah. So, snip, and it's an interesting thing where white, I think, still believed he could draw this thing, and he still has practical chances, but the problem is that the d5 pawn is so in the way of his bishop. And so maybe I'll just show the rest of this game and then we'll call it a day. Let's see here. Oh yeah, we went into double score sheet territory here, right? So the guy played rook g2, bishop d4, snip, snip, and I played bishop d4 because I knew I would want to control f6, f5, g5, and I'm pretty sure this is lost because the pawns are on light squares and they're just making that bishop on c4 just superfluous. So yeah, I'll definitely do a deep dive on this position as well, but I just can't see it for white here. The pawns are really poisoning his bishop. And by the way, I want to say I feel like I've seen endgames like this out of a Benko, out of a Benko gone wrong for white, and probably because I had white or something in a similar position. So rook d1, bishop e5. What do we do here? Rook g1. I might be able to take the thing now, but there's no rush. Because now I just want to fix the king. Rook h1, g4. Oh yeah, this is pretty simple here. Rook h4, check. Now my king gets to improve. I should just take the pawn. I did this, and then I took the pawn. Rook c1. Now I can trade it off. White resigned because this is a well-known opposite color bishop thing where my pawn will advance to f3, and if these pawns weren't here, that's a known drawn position. But of course, you're going to have to give me the bishop, and then everything's going to fall apart. I had another endgame in round 2, and as Vishnu noted, in round 1, I had an endgame as well. So, it was a victory for the endgames. And I'll say the last round, I played this kid, Praveen Balakrishnan, and played a really nice game and prepped my French really well, even though my position was fundamentally sound. He played some stuff, maybe I'll show it next time, where I feel like he just knocked me out, and I didn't have any real chances that I felt. So I didn't feel like I played that poorly. But definitely, I could argue that my opening wasn't that good, and that's by all means, I think, at least compared to other people, my weakest point. And one cool thing I've realized about what my training is doing is trying to tailor my opening repertoire so that I get positions that I like. I want closed maneuvering positions where I can think about what's going on in an intuitive way, because I'm not that good tactically, and I want positions where we get an end game. And I don't want like this hectic thing that he threw at me. And sometimes when you're black, especially when you're black and you face e4 and somebody throws the hammer at you, anybody can get taken out like that. All right. So Kybrex, are you are the famous William Hogarth, right? Yeah, that's totally, I guess, right? Um, so that's really cool. One thing, so cool about this stream is I'm interacting with people all over the world. And I feel like I used to play when I was playing in Europe. I would meet more people, and, anyways, I don't get to play that much. And now when I play these open tournaments in the US, honestly, I don't have any time to meet anybody. It's just like 2 rounds a day. And then I don't have any time to talk to anybody. And then I feel like the few hours I have in between the rounds, I'm just totally knocked out. But actually, on that note, let me just put out my two things before we go. First of all, we got the tournaments. So week and after next, maybe I'll see Vishnu over there. Vishnu, by the way, gave me that book, Over the Test of Time by Kasparov, after my 60 Memorable Games, the most expensive book ever. So that's my retirement policy over there. If it goes wrong for me, I'll sell that on eBay. And to kind of finish with the theme, I really felt like me doing that little video for Vishnu helped me with the game I showed and just understanding the ideas. So I'll put my little shingle out if you want to do lessons with me. I offer lessons. And also, because I charge an extraordinary amount, if you just want to submit a game and have me look at it, we have a show here on chess.com, end of the month. And this month, I want to make sure people know it's going to be on Tuesday. So Tuesday the 25th. So what is that? 4 to 7 East Coast, 1 to 4. Excuse me. Yeah, 4 to 7 East Coast, 1 to 4 West Coast time. And you can, if you search like the forums on chess.com and just search my name, you'll see that. So 2 ways to have me look at your game if you like. All right, guys, I will be back next week. And that'll be the week before the show. I'll give you an update how I'm doing. Thank you for following the stream. It really helps me kind of get in the mindset for what I need to do. And it puts me in a place where I'm not just totally alone in my own little chess study. Helping me, if you're alone in your chess study, you're reading the Russian book, you're going to think it's Padya. And you're going to say Padya for like ever, when in fact it's Ladia for the rook. All right, everybody. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.